My name is Buckel, and this is the effects of social media on face-to-face communication. So teens today are learning to communicate using technology, social media, their phones, and according to the Child Mind Institute, these teens are learning to communicate looking at a screen, and so they're missing out on a lot of communication skills. And they lack this when they get older and they go into the workplace, and if they try to get a job using communication, they're already behind others around them. And they lack these key skills because they miss out on parts of communication. According to James Borg, who is an author with a degree in psychology, has written many books on the mind and the child mind, body language makes up 93% of our human communication, which means when these kids are communicating through technology and they're not in person talking to each other, they're missing out on 93% of communication. They're missing out on those social cues used through body language, how people stand, how they react to you. And so they don't learn these skills, and when you don't learn it as a child, it's much harder as an adult. So what happens when they communicate using social media and technology is you see individuation, which comes from Edward Kessler, who is the first source in our stimulus material. And that's where identities are withdrawn when social norms are taken off the table. So when you're talking online, you start to hide your identity because this isn't a normal conversation. And when you start to hide your identity, you have disinhibition, which comes in, which is another term from the stimulus material, which is where you say stuff you wouldn't normally say. So in a normal conversation, you wouldn't say highly offensive things or offensive words or racial slurs, but when your identity is taken away and no one knows who you are and it's all anonymous, you can say whatever you want and nothing is put onto your name. It doesn't stick with you. Whereas in person, if you say something, everyone remembers that as you saying that, and it stays with your name wherever you go. And another problem is that we can't just ask social media to take care of this problem. Social media isn't going to want to give up its profits that it's making from all these people. They're not just going to hand over their profits and make less money. And another thing is we can't take away tech. Tech still does incredible things for us. According to the International Journal of Scientific and Engineering Research, technology has allowed messages to be sent anywhere, anytime, irrespective of distance. We can now send things from America to China, messages in seconds, whereas before it would have taken months or days to mail it. So tech still does incredible things for us. We just need to know how to limit it. So my solution one is using education programs. So this will be setting up different education programs in communities and libraries and restaurants and wherever. And informing parents of the problems that communicating through technology and their teens causes and what it does to their teens in the long run and how it affects their communication skills. And the hope of these programs would be to incite parents to act in their own homes. So it wouldn't be forcing parents to act. It would be hoping that the information given makes them want to help their children learn these skills and getting them to act at home, because parents are the biggest influencers of kids. And by teaching them to learn these skills at home, it would stay with these kids longer and all through their life. So this graph is by the National Health Interview Survey, and this is cigarettes after they ran education programs. And you can see the line in green is the adult use of cigarettes consistently went down after they used these education programs. So we've seen that education programs do work with things like cigarettes, which are addictive behaviors, chemically addictive with their nicotine, and the education programs work. So theoretically, with something like communicating, which is just a habit, education programs should also work. So the cons of this is it would cost a lot of money to pay people to gather information, to do their own surveys, and to set these up in places or rent out spaces across the world. And also, you can't force action. Like I said, it would be encouraging parents through the use of information to act, but you cannot force parents to act on the information they're given, and there are going to be those who see this information, say, so what, and go home and do nothing about it. The pros, though, are that we would be hitting the problem at the source. We would be going right to the biggest influencers and trying to get them to change their kids' behaviors and habits, and that it would be fairly easy to put in place because these kind of education programs have been done before, and because it's such an important problem, libraries and different public gathering places would be open to allowing education programs. So my solution 2 is using school regulations. This would be implementing school rules and such that don't allow, I guess, the recreational use of technology, allowing technology for school use and students to learn how to use technology for school use, but not letting them use their phones or electronic devices, whatever it may be, for playing games or watching videos or such that don't relate to schoolwork, and instead forcing them into conversation. So like at breaks, at lunch, instead of having a bunch of students looking down at their phone playing on video games, having them talk to each other in person and learn these communication skills at school. So the cons of this are ways around it. You can't have teachers everywhere to enforce every single student. It's just not possible. Also, students would be resistant to it. No student's going to want to have that taken away from them, and so you would see a lot of resistance, which is what makes it hard to enforce. And then it would limit the ability to communicate with others for students to be able to talk to maybe their friends who go to different schools on break, to call them or text them or such, would be limited, which could be seen as a negative in the eyes of the student. The pros, though, are that it could be fairly immediate. These could be just change a school rule, and it could be implemented either like right now or the next following school year. And also, it wouldn't have any major monetary cost, because you would just put it in as another thing, a rule that every teacher and staff needs to enforce as part of working at the school. So you wouldn't necessarily have to hire more staff just to enforce this rule. So in conclusion, I said solution 1 is the best solution, because it would be attacking the problem at its source, and it would be affecting these kids at home, whereas at school it's like 7 hours a day, 5 days a week, with summer breaks, spring breaks, and so you're not getting it every day, and it's only a school rule. Right after school, they can go back to using this technology, whereas at home with the parents, if it's ingrained as a habit at home and it's taught by their parents, it's much more likely to last. And then also, it's a proven solution, as we saw with the cigarettes. We saw that education programs do work with addictive behaviors like nicotine, and so it will work with this. As Margaret Thatcher said in her address to the UN, that this problem is one that affects us all, and so action needs to be taken on an international level. This isn't something that can just happen across America, because it's not something that just affects America. It affects everyone across the world, Europe, Canada, Mexico, everywhere. It affects everyone, and action needs to be taken on all levels if we're going to fix this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, McAllister. So could you tell me if there was some evidence that you gathered that you didn't use, and why did you choose not to use it?
Some of it was how it affected teens in the workplace. So how the lack of communication skills might have affected them in jobs and what employers thought of that. And I just looked at the other evidence I had and decided that it wasn't necessary for my presentation. While it would have added to it, it wasn't a necessary part of it.
Okay. And what additional questions emerged from your research, and why are these questions important?
Some of my questions after my research were how the use of technology to communicate might affect teens or kids' brains chemically, because their brains are changing, and how this new stimulus in their lives might change their brains chemically and affect them chemically. And if I had more time or had done more research, I would have liked to look into this.
Thank you.